Welcome to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia on WCJA 1100 AM, where we do speak the truth in love based on Ephesians 4:15. In today's woke PC culture, there are many forces that want to stop free speech, especially for people of faith. Good men and women must be willing to stand up for their faith and be salt and light to preserve our freedom. True freedom comes from faith in Jesus Christ. In John 8:32, God's word says, "The truth will set you free." Today, I'd like to welcome you, friends. I'd like to welcome a friend, Maria Zack. Maria, it's great to be with you today.
Thanks, Clint. Wonderful to see you this weekend and certainly to be with you today.
Well, thank you so much. And, we have a long history of being involved with the GOP, especially in Georgia. I know you're living in Florida now. What a great place to be in South Florida. But tell us about what God has been having you do recently to help restore good governments and better governance in our government. And we have been really encouraged by what, in my view, Elon Musk has been doing with Doge and really trying to get to the bottom line of our good, hard-working taxpayer dollars going to things that are truly leftist or un-American or really not in the best interest of taxpayers. Tell us about what you're doing there.
I felt very called after many decades in government affairs, working alongside you in the Christian movement, to have good governance and certainly to end the atrocities that were happening and certainly the school degradation as well as abortion, the increase in drugs. And I just felt this calling, Clint, that God said I needed to start an organization called Nations in Action. And a dear mutual friend of ours said to me, Maria, start with nations, not nations, but American action. Nations is kind of big. I said, maybe it's biblical, all nations. And I didn't want to underestimate God. So I kept the name Nations in Action. And today I find myself having conversations with world leaders, presidents of countries, and we have been building solution kits to bring about good governance and restore the nations that have been captured. So it's a huge undertaking. It's exciting, exhilarating, scary. It's honestly, Clint, shocking. The devil's been hard at work and we have a lot of work to do. I want to encourage everyone not to lose hope. We have really great traction. And as you said, Doge is a great start. I gave Elon's team our audits, affidavits, and transparency program. The start with the audit is starting to show horrific use of our money where we're pushing people into poverty while we're taking their money to take down morals and values of foreign countries is unconscionable. And I believe we all pay for this. There's a day that we're going to be called upon, at the pearly gates of why did we allow this to happen? And my point would be, let's put in the bumpers, the underpinning into government. So with all of our years, you and I battling with amendments and legislation and doing everything to have godly principles, it came very clear to me the truth shall set you free, as you said. And so therefore that transparency needs to be there, Clint. And you and I both know the battles of government and inside the legislature when the bill's going through the process. And in my decades doing that, I could see we weren't doing proper audits. We weren't doing things to protect the government employees. They were absolutely being threatened. And sadly, many of them were very scared to death when they saw corruption and felt they had no pathway to go forward. And my goal was to say, okay, let's build the solutions, the bumpers that actually can contain all of the bad actors on the outside and build the solution kits. So what I did was I put together an audit, an affidavit, and a transparency program. And those programs actually are holding firm. It's a fiscal and constitutional audit. It's an employee protection affidavit, and it's full transparency in real time, Clint. Yes. Real time. Imagine that.
Well, that's incredible. So what are some of the biggest abuses y'all have seen? Because we read about them in the newspaper, but what's really real out there?
Our investigations at nationsinaction.org will actually terrify people. We have an understanding now of the global criminal syndicate that has invaded many of the state departments and intelligence agencies around the world. They conspire with entities within government that they created, including USAID. They take our money, they fund abortions and drug running and child trafficking with our money. And I'm here to tell you that there are world leaders that are standing up. They have supplied me information, extensive information on election fraud. I told President Trump on December 24th of 2020 how the election was stolen in the country of Italy. Since then, I discovered it's been 56 plus countries. I spoke with President Bolsonaro eye to eye and explained to him how his was stolen. He knew it was something far bigger than his government could even stop, which tells you that it is a CIA, State Department level activity. And I have to say, the theft of the election back, if you had asked me in 2020, and I was on the run, I've been shot at, I've been in hiding. It's been a horrific burden on my family, but yet something God called me to do. And I just kept moving and moving, and now have had a very brave member of the Italian parliament confess to me that yes, Giorgia Meloni, the prime minister, knows, the head of their Department of Justice knows, and I am in my second criminal lawsuit over this, and people are going to find out because God's got this. I'm probably the only person who's ever excited about being sued because I dropped my witness list and I name names. So America, get ready, because globally, we're going to be naming the names of people that are not just American citizens who participate in this global criminal syndicate, but it is people throughout the world.
That's so amazing. Well, I know as a former state senator years ago, we were trying to stop the funding of Planned Parenthood. I mean, why was the state of Georgia giving money to Planned Parenthood? Of course, we know the Democrats controlled things, so we didn't ever have enough votes. But still to this day, I'm not sure if Georgia funds it, but I know the national government clearly does. And then they indeed go in and they support campaigns with our tax dollars. And I don't understand why the Democrats don't think that's not okay. I mean, even if we were doing that, to my knowledge, Republicans don't create organizations that the taxpayer funds and goes out and works for Republicans. Maybe they do. They may say the military would be that type of thing that would do that, military type companies. But when I think about that situation of our money, the things they were going to, the studies we were doing across different countries, promoting the homosexual lifestyle, transgenderism, doing surgery on innocent children without their knowledge or permission, based on their 11-year-old's opinion. And I just don't understand why we'd allow that type of thing going on. Of course, we look at our country right now with women sports being ruined by transgenders that are, men that have a man's body. I mean, you look at them and you can just tell they're stronger and bigger than the woman they're playing against. And then even in Minnesota, softball team, had an ace, or in California had an ace pitcher that was a male, and all the girls playing. I mean, I got 3 daughters and 4 granddaughters, and I can't imagine them having to compete with men.
Absolutely. It's horrific through USAID of the transgender gay agenda. The gay flag was flying over our embassies and not the US flag. Can you imagine? And we paid for that. And so they stopped having their 4th of July parties at the embassies. To me, the employee affidavit program is so critical, Clint, because inside those embassies, they were actually involved in human trafficking programs. I can tell you in Guatemala alone, I was given significant information about a specific person who was raping and murdering little boys. He was in the election counting room at a hotel with Alex Soros as they rigged the election. This is significant information. It is my hope and prayer that Kesh Patel and Dan Bongino, both at the FBI, will root through the paperwork and actually start having those investigations and tackling the problem. Same with in Italy in 2020, when the theft of the election happened. The thing that shocked me most, I was speaking at a location and someone came, and it was clear that person was specifically coming for me. They came a long way, and they said, your life's in danger. And I said, well, okay, tell me something I don't know. And she said, well, the ambassador to Italy was very upset. His family, they're getting threatened. And I said, well, I don't even know who that is. I haven't reported on that. Well, then I went and, of course, looked, and it's like, holy mackerel, the ambassador to Italy was the head of the New York, New Jersey Port Authority on 9/11. You can't make this up, Clint. The people inside our embassy were actually engaged in working with Leonardo, the eighth largest defense contracting firm, from the evidence that we have received from multiple sources. I have at least 11 sources on this, and I'm not going to stop. Not only have they stolen our nation, but they are stealing many nations, and then they use our tax dollars, put our American citizens into poverty. This isn't Democrat or Republican. This is good versus evil. And we have to remember the battle is spiritual. We have to stand firm together, because you can't convince me all Democrats think we shouldn't have transparency, that they shouldn't have full audits and full affidavits. And above all, the thing that I was really excited about, Elon Musk tweeted out about my property tax elimination program right after he was starting Doge, right as that was happening in tandem. And President Trump liked my program back in October 2020. So I thought come November of 2020, I'd be eliminating your property tax. Now I can see it's even more urgent to do that, because we have to get people out of poverty. It's wrong. The system is wrong. Families need to be together. They need to be able to own their home and have their educational system back in the home.
That's really good. And now, when you talk about getting rid of the property tax, obviously, to your point, a lot of that money goes to education. And we have a lot of people that feel like, our education for public education is important. And I would understand that desire. But again, when God's taken out of the school, when prayer is taken out of the school, what replaces it? A religion of secular humanism. I mean, I don't understand why people can't understand that is reality, that a lot of your textbooks are made by Muslim owners. Muslims own these companies. So they put down Christianity and try to build up Islam. They try to destroy nations that are freedom fighters, if you will. And I pray that the country will open up their eyes. And I'm a big, being choice of education. The money ought to follow the child, right? So where would that money to fund education come from if you don't pay property taxes?
So currently, you don't know where your money's going, and you don't know how much they're
Oh, that's true.
printing. So the truth shall set us free in knowing how much they're even printing, where it's going, all the different programs. I'm more and more horrified every day at the lack of morality by individuals who think it's okay just to rob all of our assets out of government. So we have this model of the audits, affidavits, and transparency, but we also have the investigation piece. The more President Trump keeps opening things up, and anyone, by the way, Clint, can put these in immediately. If you take the Public Service Commission in Georgia, you could easily have them embed them administratively now. It doesn't take an act of law. I prefer them to be codified, as I'm sure you would as well. So we have a solid government foundation. The funding, I asked the legislator once in Georgia, and this is really fun for me now in retrospect, because I said I wanted to do this. And he said, Maria, where are you going to get the $10 billion? I said, Mike, how do you know I need $10 billion? I said, let's talk about implicit costs, explicit costs, opportunity costs. He didn't ever do the math. And I ran an algorithm through Chat GPT recently, and the algorithm was extraordinary. And the calculation, actually, all of this was built off of the great plan that you will remember. Glenn Richardson, Speaker of the House, worked so hard. Art Laffer came. That work that he did lives on, because now when Elon Musk tweeted this out for us, lo and behold, our governor here, DeSantis, said, yes, we need to eliminate property tax, and we're now working on that. So I'm thrilled the legislature is stepping up in Florida. So it's when you start to say, okay, well, what is the impact on Medicaid? And I met with Jim Jordan many years ago about this, and I said, he goes, Maria, where are we going to find the money? And why is this federal? And I started laughing. I go, Jim, well, I didn't even laugh. I kind of jumped on him. And I said, Jim, are you kidding me? What about the SAMHSA grants? And he goes, what are they? And I said, those are the Department of Justice grants to go fix up blighted communities to lower crime. But what you just did was outprice their homes. You took away their property because you elevated their property tax once you built up the neighborhoods to look nicer. So government kept increasing their property tax. Boom, Martin Luther King's neighborhood. Everyone's pushed out. It was so atrocious, Clint. It hurts my soul that they think this is okay. It's not okay. And let's not talk about capital gains tax. And I already had President Trump moving forward in this direction before the 2020 election was stolen. So that work continues. We will continue to eliminate property tax. We will continue to have these kits out. Everybody needs to not lose hope. It's progress. It's a lot of work. We're having great successes globally, and it's so critical that we get back to the foundations of faith in government and in the family, rebuilding the family, and building that property tax elimination piece creates the sense of community, and your neighbors become like grandparents, and those days that we just loved and cherished in America.
That's very good. And I mean, you're right. The gentrification, I mean, I just think about around the Atlanta Stadium. It's just the so-called West End. I mean, it's become like a new Buckhead with the redevelopment of it. And it's the apartments that are very high rated. And then, like you say, you take those old homes around MLK's neighborhood and they're just totally transformed to a higher value, which, like you say, the property tax then forces the people out of the community and forces them to go somewhere else. And so, yes, we want to help people and give them a hand up, not a handout. We want to do things to improve the individual's values, but then in the meantime, like you say, the values of their property, but you're going to have them have to move out because the grandson or whatever can't afford to buy back into that neighborhood with their job. And of course, with higher interest rates that JD, our Powell is doing whatever, and he's just making it tough to buy those homes again because of high interest rates when the rest of the world is starting to lower interest rates and our guys are always behind on the Federal Reserve side. Now, when you think about the reality of property tax, help me really understand that, because when I was a state senator, I was only there 2 terms. I never voted in the 4 years I was there for a budget because of the games that they played. I mean, they would do a 30-year bond on a road, and then you'd have to pay for the road for 30 years, right?
Yep.
That just to keep a balanced budget, right? So the road's not going to last 30 years. So we all know that, but it was a way to get them to buy this road that they wanted through their district or whatever. And I was just always amazed at the abuse that went on and the cover-ups, if you will, by someone wanting to, fund a pet project while so-called keeping a balanced budget in Georgia, which we have by Constitution, by the law. And so when I think about that type of thing, what would you do when you take that property tax money? What's going to happen? I mean, how are we going to fund education? Are we going to help
Yeah.
individuals with it? The money will follow the child and the family, or, how's it going to be done?
Shifting to the general fund, the state general fund, basically. So it's my hope and prayer that the federal government portion, that now that President Trump is eliminating DOE at the federal side, which is all bureaucracy and corruption, and God only knows how many employees really show up for work because we have no transparency and no affidavits. Many employees are on the payroll that never ever show up for work at all levels of government. So we have to stop the corruption. And President Trump's ability to do the business deals, the art of the deal, the cool thing is he already was willing to work on that formula. If you look at the reduction in Medicaid that would occur, that actually should be factored into this. And that's what I mentioned to the former legislator in Georgia. I said, look, this is a simple math equation. You want to tell me how much I need just because you collect 10 billion, tell me how much, if you get rid of the system, you no longer need to be funding pensions of all the employees, all the lawsuits, all the buildings, all the computers, all the software, like exponentially pensions, like think through the healthcare and everything else of all those employees, shift those employees, streamline government in total, and letting people own their homes shifts everything. And you will not have the level of crime, so your criminal justice budget goes down. You have so much impact when parents are home with their families. And that is where we have gotten this wrong for so long. And certainly by having public education and not having more kids in the home with the parents learning their values, their principles, and the education they want them to have and specialize based on their best knowledge of what the child needs. And Clint, you were one of the best. And I don't just say that flippantly. To not vote for the budget, it is abhorrent what is in our budget. And this whole word compromise and people wanting more and more parties. Florida's about to get multiple candidates and multiple parties for governor. It's atrocious because once you start compromising, you don't get and you don't strive for what is best. Do we want to be a mediocre state, a mediocre country? No, we want to be the best. We want our kids to have the best. And to do that, you don't vote on budgets when you don't know that the money's going and funding gay pride parades in foreign countries to take down their morals. It is wrong and unconscionable. And it is now time for everybody to step up and demand that their congressmen sign the pledges. This is an election year. This is the best time to say, take that pledge at goodgovernanceguarantee.com, take them to every single Georgia politician and have them sign it and have them promise to implement the audit affidavit and transparency at all levels. And that's a way out of this nightmare we're having. It's only going to get worse, Clint, if we don't confront these problems.
Well, I was our in a Bible study I'm involved with. We're reading a book called Fighting Shadows that we got through an Ironman conference, if you will, at our church. A group of men coming together, hundreds, like 500 of them. And that book, I'm into a Bible study. I really don't want to do a book, but this book was given to us by that organization, so we decided to go through it. We're not a book club; we're a Bible study. So we're reading this book, and this week's lesson was apathy. They had done a survey of 400 women, and they asked them, what's the biggest challenge you see with men today? And they said, it's apathy. There's no clear vision. Men are not standing up. Men are not getting involved and making things happen. And I think about even our recent Georgia Republican Party meeting. We had prayer gathering, and it was all women on the stage. There was no man up there that I saw. Now, I got there a couple minutes late, so maybe there were some men at the very beginning, but there were no men up there when I came into the room. So what do we do about the apathy of men? It seems like mothers, and they get fired up for their kids, that type of thing.
Right.
But a lot of men just want to sit and play their video games. Not all men, but a lot. Play golf, whatever. But they don't really want to get involved with those frontline issues. How do we encourage them to do that? Because, again, we got to fight. I mean, I think about what happened with Trump. That's one of the things it says, that, God does fight for us. He wants us to fight for our families, our countries, for his kingdom. How do we get men to fight and stand up and say, stop being apathetic?
I think it's really important to understand the pressure on men these days. You have them trying to be the breadwinner, trying to make sure they have enough money for their family, for their kids. Their kids can't even afford college anymore. It's so outrageous. So the pressure that's put on them is predominantly because government caused it. We don't have to have government like that. We can reduce taxes, give you your home, let a parent stay home. And I think that lets the wife also be far more capable of servicing the husband's needs as well as the children, and they don't have to work. But when you're talking about men having to work 2 and 3 jobs now to pay the taxes, especially property tax, it's just unsustainable, Clint. So the more we alleviate that tax pressure, and to go back, you said something earlier about the Federal Reserve. This is how bad it is. People don't even know who the Bank of International Settlements is. They dictate our policy. They are not even American. It is out of Switzerland that they help dictate the rates. And the Federal Reserve's not answering to us either. We have lost complete control of the federal government. And that has to end. And it ends with audits, affidavits, and transparency. So President Trump putting in Doge, getting it moving. Now we can expand it. It should be constitutional because we have AI, as scary as it is. We use it for the benefit of the good. Creating an algorithm on the constitutionality of the actions of government alone will rip apart our budgets. It will embarrass the legislators who have done this, who have taken our money and thought they knew better. You don't care. you can keep working 3 jobs. No, it's wrong. It's immoral. So to bring back that decency and giving the man his right to be at home with his children working 1 job, owning his home for real, and then giving the ability of the family network to have neighborhood picnics out in the community. But above all, using the churches as hubs, Clint, during those school days for parents that homeschool. They should use these churches as the hubs, the community hub, re-embracing that sense of community, the picnics, the barbecues, and the family that are not blood relatives. I was very lucky in my life. My parents had many close super friends, and I just always had them as aunts and uncles. And I just love that. And I think back to those days, and I'm sad for our kids that don't have that. And we're trying to rebuild it. That's what we're doing. And our country's in trouble, Clint. We know it. It needs our help. And
Absolutely.
every one of us, every person listening can make a huge difference fast, because the number one thing they don't know is that politicians hate sunlight on what they do wrong. And audits, affidavits, and transparency gives us that sunlight. And so by getting your city council, your school board, your county commission, your state senate and state house members, the federal government, your US Senate and congressmen, it's not that many people. And you can make such a huge change. And when one county does it, then another county looks embarrassed because they didn't do it. And it just starts snowballing. So now I had a world leader, a man running for president of Romania, who said to me, Maria, this will stop World War III. I'm not only going to sign your pledge, I'm going to demand that every leader throughout every European nation must sign this and implement it immediately. So people are catching on. This is critical to save the world.
Okay, now you had some recent events where a recent event where people signed the pledge. Help
Yes.
us understand. Have you seen people stick to that pledge? Because one of those names we saw made certain promises that I don't feel like were fulfilled in his first term.
Right.
So how can we assure that your what they're signing they're going to actually stand by?
So I'm thrilled to announce I have just stacks and stacks of people who signed it at the conference. And a Senate candidate you have in Georgia, Reagan Bach, said, "Rebellion is tyrant. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." Thomas Jefferson was her quote, and I love that. And she pledged to enact all of them. Now, both party chairman candidates for the GOP also signed it. So that's very significant. What that means is that the party will demand that all elected officials do this. So what happens if people don't do it? We have a performance appraisal and a trial that is done. And I can tell you, Senator Butch Miller, former Senator Butch Miller, ran for lieutenant governor and did not like and enjoy his performance appraisal and trial. It was in his community, and his community learned that he was pushing George Soros funded organizations and laws to pass in Georgia, including national popular vote. We did an exit interview after our performance appraisal, and I can tell you, after the trial, they said, Butch is our friend, but we had no idea he was supporting George Soros based issues.
He was a
And
Republican from North Atlanta, right?
yes,
I think
Gainesville.
Gainesville. Okay, wow.
Yes, yes.
Even smaller town. I thought he was around Dunwoody or something. But okay,
Yeah.
Gainesville, even a smaller town, USA.
And he was the heir apparent. He had the name ID and the money. And when Burt Jones elevated in stature, he just kept growing and growing, because we took Senator Miller and we said, no, we're not doing this. We don't do illegal things. The national popular vote's illegal. It's against the Constitution. And I keep watching the Georgia General Assembly do it over and over and over again. And honestly, I'm tired. And I may not live there, but I love Georgia. And I'm going to fight for every family around the world. And this does it. And they can't get away with it now. And Bert walked up to me and he said, Maria, I heard what you did. That was amazing. And I said, you know what, Bert? I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. If you're dirty, I'm coming for you. And he had his hands up like I had a gun to him. And that's the thing. They don't like sunlight. It is a tool. And we have an opportunity to use that tool because we do performance appraisals for employees every day, right? In our
Absolutely.
businesses. So
Yes.
why are we not doing it on politicians? Well, guess what? Nations in Action is doing it, our Good Governance Guarantee. So we're going to have everything online for everyone at goodgovernanceguarantee.org
That's awesome. Now, tell us
or
some action.
.com. Sorry, .com.
Yes, give us the action steps of how to eliminate property taxes in your state, because I know that was a big issue on the big bill that Trump wanted to get passed. Blue
Yes.
states, very expensive homes,
Yes.
wanted property tax credit, for their income tax, which
Sure.
makes small states or red states that have fiscal responsibility pay for the bad decisions of big blue states, right?
Right.
So they compromised on that, and I understand that's going to be part of the what you got to do in a bill. You got to compromise sometime, but that's unacceptable. Why should we in Georgia have to pay for the big government of New York and California and Michigan or wherever it is?
Well, we shouldn't have to pay for it. So your point is absolutely right. We have a 10th Amendment, states' rights. We should be functioning as a state and not reliant on our government at the federal level. And so when you take first, what is the cost of running the program? If you do the audits, affidavits, and transparency first, you're cleaning out corruption in government. There was a candidate who ran for president and won in Colombia in the 70s, and he put the employee affidavit into effect. He said, as soon as I'm elected, it's coming in. Boom, he wins the election. 30% of the employees quit because they knew they'd be arrested for the corruption. President Trump didn't need to do the buyback program. I don't know what that number will be in the state of Georgia, whoever your next governor is, or if the current governor, Brian Kemp, wants to do this program. I'm happy to work with him on it. It's critical that we get rid of the dead weight in government. What is government's role? Well, the audit, affidavit, and transparency will tell you what is constitutional. So you're streamlining government, and the cost savings is billions and billions. The ability to have the affidavit program, you're going to stop the corruption and theft. So that's more money back into the system. And the transparency is going to give everyone the right to see everything in real time, online, plenty of cloud space, right? So we have that great gift of doing math the right way, not government fuzzy math, which is so typical. And we build that algorithm. First, you have to assess what is the current cost of your program that is then saved by eliminating it. And that's real cost. That's not just, oh, Maria, we collect 10, we need 10. BS. Total BS. Like, don't give me stupid answers. I like an answer that says we're going to reduce and take in the full calculation of every department and the employees, their chair, their software. I want to know every single cost, because then you're talking real math. And then you have to question, was the system even upright financially on the front end? And that's why they keep playing with property tax. They keep saying, Maria, we lowered your property tax. No, you didn't. You played the game and you capped it, but then you assessed me higher. So my taxes keep going up. That shell game can't happen for families anymore. So that calculation is critical. With AI, certainly by the end of the year, it's going to be figuring out a lot more than it already is. And I started running some of the algorithms, and it's very exciting, Clint, because the states can do money back, or the federal government can do money back to the states, but also what is the proper learning of the child? Do we need that many teachers, or are kids going to be homeschooled more? And they already were, based on what happened in 2020. Parents started seeing what their kids were doing and they took their kids out. Did you hear anything? I didn't hear anything in the budget going down. All those kids left public education. Where'd the money go? Gee, we don't know. Where are the election records? We don't know. We don't get to see them. It's our government. We need it back. Audits, affidavits, and transparency do that. And by knowing exactly what the teachers have been doing in their unions to alter elections to go get more money for the schools when it's not in the best interest of the child and the parents. And so you're literally shifting everything, every way you've ever thought about government, by restoring it back to the people, by giving them the truth.
That's good. And again, give us maybe 3 action steps if we want to see property taxes go away in our community. Now, I'm assuming that's on homes. Is it on commercial property too?
I think it's starting out on homes, so that way you
Yes.
can build the formula. It's going to be important to understand what the White House is going to do and recommend on the formula and the money back
So that
in.
would be your primary residence. It wouldn't necessarily be a beach home or that type of thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Not immediately. I would like to see where there is freedom, but obviously boundaries. If there's commercial, you can't let all these commercial entities buy up residential homes and people never own their home. That's not going to work for society, not for a civil society. So restructuring to where there's taxation, but not through property tax. It's a very different structure. If you're going to have commercial property and it's not in the system of arranging a valuation system and then there's lawsuits and that same infrastructure, we want to get rid of that infrastructure and look at a different taxation mechanism for commercial property. So that's something that I believe needs some think tanks and some people to get together on working that piece of the solution, because it's imperative that we know what the goal is and what we have to do
Right.
to fix it.
Right. Let's go back to some action steps. How
Sure.
would we, in our state, wherever we are across the country, what are the action steps you recommend to get rid of property taxes on our homes?
So we have a property tax elimination kit with 26 items that actually walk you through doing the math. You build your team first. So if it's a legislative group that is doing it, you bring in economists, you bring in some of the universities, and you work on what the algorithm looks like. You have to do the real math at the departments to understand what is currently the infrastructure and the cost of the existing system that are the cost savings. So once you know what the cost savings are, then you know how much money you need to supplement. So understanding that variation is critical. The understanding what will come from the feds. So this asking your state legislatures to start a not just a study committee, an active committee on the legislation that are bringing in testimony that build that infrastructure. What are the steps for each entity to give you the real math? So the counties, Association of County Commissioners would be brought in, the cities, as well as the state departments that have, some of the states do have property tax. And so you want to bring in all the interested parties, you put them in there and you start doing the real math, because you can't even start talking about a replacement tax until you know what the real math is. And I would argue, Clint, that knowing knowing what we're doing to force people into poverty, you'll be peeling people off the Medicaid rolls. And when you're doing that, that cost saving, that's a savings when you're taking people off Medicaid. So if we can keep doing that, and people will be able to live, and we get rid of all of the housing assistance programs, all that cost savings of money we're already spending. I'm curious if the math is break even, or worse, that we're spending more than what they're actually taking in, which is very possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, where have you seen local communities be able to get rid of, or local states get rid of their property taxes completely yet?
There are foreign countries already doing it. We're just slow. So America, the great one, a little slow to the take. And in Africa, there's places that are already doing it. Countries that are suffering more than us, and sadly have been victims of horrific crimes. They have had to be a step ahead, so they are doing it. I would say it's important, and I love Jonathan Williams at ALEC, American Legislative Exchange
Yes.
Council. I met with Jonathan. I met with Steve Moore, the great economist who wants income tax first, not taxed, and then property tax. So he's with us. So we've got really great minds, great thinkers. Jonathan Williams wrote a paper about it for me several years ago. So this isn't something pie in the sky. This is great thinkers, great policymakers who understand there is a way to do this. So it's a little complicated because we don't know the real math. So your step one is getting to know the real math, what is collected, the second thing is, what is all of the ancillary payments to groups to subsidize housing, so to give people housing. And third, what are the repercussions for people that don't have housing? So what is it that is the math equation for all the homeless?
Yes, yes, that's
Because
good. And I tell
yeah,
you, one of the biggest challenges we have here in our local community, I think everybody faces these so-called local option sale tax, right? And we get rid of 1 point on the
yeah,
state government
it's
here in
lost.
Georgia, for
Yeah,
example, and they put in the splosh, local option sales tax, and then they tell you, well, it's all going to balance out. And you go, well, wait a minute, a
no,
$50,000 family income,
yeah,
1% is $500, right? So
yeah,
you're gonna tax them. You act like it's no big deal, but when you go
right.
to buy a car, when you go to buy, $50,000, if we're spending it all,
Mhm.
in theory, you're paying $500 more tax, and that's a big impact to a lot of families, especially single moms. And I just don't understand why our government and in our chamber of commerce,
Yeah,
I have a lot of people that are friends of mine that they're very good people. They're in the chamber, but the chamber sometimes I'm just like, why are y'all so liberal? I mean, if we do all these socialist programs that a federal government and some state governments and local governments want to do, they're going to put you out of business. Why is that in your self interest? It's just like abortion. I don't understand how any business can think abortion's okay to be PC when you're literally killing your future customers. They're going to buy houses and cars and buy, your services of any kind that you do. Why do you think that's in your best interest? I've even seen a UN report talking about that, about how bad it is. The
yeah,
world's population is going to start going down. Japan is dying out. France is dying out. All these countries around us because of abortion. And even when you look at the so called immigrant population in the United States of America in 1970, roughly 5% of the people were foreign born. You know what the number is today?
what?
15%.
Mm,
15%. And so that kind of growth is not sustainable. Look,
right.
I like people. I've been helped by international people right here in America, at times services that I need or whatever. They're
Right.
great people, caregiving, whatever. They're great people, but they need to come here legally. And when we have a government that lets everybody come across and really invade us, they say there are 300,000 Chinese nationals, fighting age men, that have been led in this country that are waiting for their orders. There's no question about it. We only have 1.5 million full time military people in our country. We have a lot of reservists for sure, but I mean, they got 300,000 waiting for their orders. And when are we going to wake up? 2.2 million Chinese nationals in this country in jobs like in universities, in where science is, big business. There's so many of them here, and we just are not aware of the potential those people have. And we think about an invasion force of 20 million people, and you look out there out west with the things that have been going around the country. They're saying June 14th there's going to be some kind of major event that's going to affect our country. And you look at them and you go, why are these people fighting against a country they think they want to live in with the flag from the country they left? Particularly Mexican flag. Why are they
Right.
flying that flag and burning the American flag when they want to live in America? It just doesn't make any sense.
I can tell you why. It's your USAID and paying NGOs to go do this. They pre-place stacks of bricks. I want all your listeners to hear this in the Brunswick area and around Atlanta. When you see stacks of bricks, it's pre-orchestrated. They put them in place and they fund this. And that is what we have to stop. That's why the audits, affidavits, and transparency are so critical, Clint. If we don't do this, we do not get our government back. All systems are down. If anyone thinks any system, law enforcement, anything is working, it's not. Congress isn't working. It's not functioning. They're giving money to things they don't even know. Why do they not know? And why do they even vote for the budget? They need to call you, Clint, and learn how to have that courage, that backbone that you had. You were rarity, and there were a few others with you. And I remember that. And that courage, it begets courage. And that's the other thing. Madison Cawthorn actually came out, a congressman, and said, oh my gosh, it's terrible. They blackmail us. They give us drugs. They give us drinks. They give us hookers. And he came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's a world hero. And people are like, Maria, he cheated on his wife and his wife left him. I said, He's a world hero because he was the first Republican congressman to say something. And now he actually has inspired another congressman to step in and do the same. Congressman Burchett from Tennessee said, yes, they are blackmailing, they are bribing all of these congressmen. And that is a huge issue. But God bless them. They're world heroes. I called their donors. I said, call them and thank them because they're heroes telling us the truth. And you know what the most shocking thing I found out? Cynthia McKinney. You remember Cynthia, the congresswoman
Absolutely.
from
Bomb
DeKalb?
thrower, bomb
She's
thrower.
she is in hiding, Clint, in Bangladesh because she tried to stand up to Nancy Pelosi because they were actually telling her the Bushes did 9/11. This system exists with this criminal syndicate, and you're going to shut up, sit down. You're going to make a ton of money. You'll get your CODAs, your congressional delegation trips, and this is how it works. She said, not for me. And she ran for president on the green ticket. That is courage. If she truly has that conviction, and she's done some interviews lately, and when you can find, for lack of a better word, common ground with Democrats, we can all agree there should not be corruption in government. There should not be bribes and blackmails. Our legislators have to be free from blackmail. Our law enforcement agencies need to function. They're not. And so, in order to get it back, it's very simple: audits, affidavits, and transparency. And it's already functioning in many places. So, we're starting to get that traction. It's hope. It's the hope we need to get the truth out there. And I can tell you, our country's really in trouble. And when I say that, I don't mean just that it's poverty and things like that. You're talking about the Chinese invasion, but I unfortunately, or fortunately, receive in our investigative side at Nations in Action the death threats for President Trump. I have the tail numbers to the airplane that brought the real shooter in for the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania. I get other death threats for him, and it is horrifying, Clint. And we have to find a way to say we're not going to allow this to happen. And the congresswoman who died in the car crash, Jackie Walorski, was one of my sources about what was happening at the border wall. We have sources all over the place, but she was courageous. And then 3 weeks after her death, Joe Biden is standing before a group going, Jackie, are you here? Well, everyone's acting like, oh, he's lost it. He didn't lose it. That was a mafia mob tactic of Jackie's not here. And you won't be either if you speak up and do what she was doing of telling Maria or anyone else what's happening.
Was
And
she a Republican or Democrat?
she was a Republican, and she and her staff all died in a car that went 80 miles per hour in a roundabout. And another congressman came to me, and I asked specifically, he had just told me he went to the roundabout. He couldn't believe it. And I called Zack's dad, the driver's dad, the staffer. And I said, did anyone talk to you about potential hacking of the vehicle? And he said, funny you say that, not the law enforcement, but it was actually the media that came to me and told me they believe that's what happened. And I have no doubt that's what happened. And what was really heartbreaking for me, I know Mike Johnson, and I said, well, Mike Johnson needs to bring in the Capitol Hill police. Did he do that? And he said, no. And I said, well, you need to ask him. And he was standing there in Mar-a-Lago right by us. And he goes, no, Maria, you need to ask him. I'm like, no, you need to ask him. You're the congressman. I have no weight in this. And he was like, no, you need to do it. And I'm sad because we need people to be courageous, and they're scared. And if our congressmen are scared, they took an oath of office, but worse, they're taking a paycheck. And that's what gets me, Clint. If you're taking a paycheck, you have an obligation. You have an oath of office. And I haven't taken an oath of office, but I swear allegiance to this country regardless. My sixth great grandfather penned the Declaration of Independence, and I gave Congress the documents on Barack Obama stealing the pallets of cash off the Iran deal. I named the CIA person. I gave the other people in the room. I know they paid off the prime ministers in Italy. I know Barack Obama moved the bank into the Bank of Merrill Lynch in Geneva, Switzerland, and carved off $8 million for the U.S. or the Italian ambassador. That's how I knew how the money was moving that played into the theft of the election in Italy.
Wow.
Knowing that now, I have been told that amazingly, that I'm going to get Barack Obama put in jail.
Wow,
So
that'd be incredible. Well,
Yep.
listen, we've only got about a minute and a half left, and I need to ask you real quick. Give me a 30-second call to action.
Go to nationsinaction.org and look at the investigations, but above all, go to goodgovernanceguarantee.com. Sign up to be a guardian, get the bills passed at the federal, state, and local levels, school board, all the way up. And that will save your country and your city.
Oh, do me a favor. Give us about a 30-second prayer. Would you go ahead and pray us out?
Heavenly Father, we ask for your blessings upon all the listeners today and for you to be with us, to guide us, and to build us, to bring us to your glory, your salvation. Keep us guided in your wishes for all of our lives, and certainly to watch over Clint and the Day family. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. In Jesus' name, for sure. Well, Maria, wow. We need to talk again, and we will if it's okay with you.
Absolutely.
You have an amazing information. I really want to get into some specifics that we need to go after, and I love any taxes we can get rid of. I'm all for it. I used to call myself Clint Day, the taxpayer's best friend.
You
That's what I
were.
ran on every time. I would just get so angry at the overspending we were doing, and we're still doing it. And at a national level, I'm hoping our politicians and the people will quit being apathetic and get involved. So thank you again. Good day, friends. I want to thank you for joining us today for Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day on WCGA 1100 AM from St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Remember, every day is a God day.